Dummy Switch Pod.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
the boys are back in studio. We're back in studio here to
Uh-huh.
give you those rugby takes. The sometimes, questionable takes, but they need to be said. What needs to be said? What
No,
needs to be said?
yeah, it's our opinions, At the end of the day, everybody's got one, so why not share, you know?
Yeah, it's time to share now. Let's talk Stormers versus Ulster. Ulster Stadium. That place,
Yeah,
it's always rocky.
yeah. It was too much for the Stormers. Just the pressure, the tempo, and then also
Mm,
just fringe defense. And we saw a lot of that this
yeah.
weekend, where fringe defense was a problem, especially for South African teams.
Yeah, I think we tend to get caught out a bit narrow in terms
Mm.
of defense. That seems like it's something that I don't know. Is it our coaching structures? It seems to be something that comes through with all of the teams. A lot of changes for the Stormers, but at the same time, as much as it's changes, you're still hoping that you're going to see something. You know what I mean? Even if
Yeah,
it's not going to win,
yeah,
put up a fight. It's an opportunity to
yeah,
go test yourself in, a cauldron. This is I
yeah,
always look at this fixture because when the Sharks played Ulster before the knockout rounds, it was sort of a test to see,
yeah.
how far you've come. And I think even in this game, it's a test for the second stringers to say, like, are you ready for that next step? And some of them,
Mm.
not so much. I mean,
No,
Ngomezulu, he had a go, but at times he was forcing it. When you force it, you make mistakes. Kate Wallace
yeah,
had to come on. Same thing with him.
no
Sometimes even the
difference.
desire, it wasn't there as much as you wanted to be there. But I mean, at the end of the day, they had something. I think I stopped counting after they had 4 injuries. So they were
Yeah,
unlucky in some respects.
yeah. Look, I think yes, unlucky. And then you also mentioned, that the with the coaching in terms of the French defense. I just think even just the setup. I just looking at it. I think it is just guys being switched off, not being completely switched on. Alert to the danger, because in every one of those instances you'll see that there was somebody that was late in arriving or somebody that
Yeah.
overtracked. So I wouldn't be too concerned. It's just the thing is that of course, it's the peaks and the troughs of and momentum in terms of these teams, and yeah, with the Stormers, yes, the injuries they counted. It would have been nice to see something, like you said, to see that okay, they've got at least, even when they down a couple of men, they've got some good backup. So bit of maybe a softish underbelly there, for most of our teams, especially that side when we go overseas. So that's still the concern, because we haven't really cracked that ceiling yet. And like you say, Ulster is definitely a cauldron, and there are a lot of those guys. I think the coaches have got the answers, especially going into, when we're going into looking at knockout fixtures and things like that, or big pressure games. Yeah, they could have been better, but it wasn't nothing really to talk about. It wasn't good for them at all.
They were getting killed in that midfield. They were getting killed in
Yeah,
that midfield. The centers, they had a
yeah.
field day. Even Mike Lowry. Mike
Mike
Lowry seems to
Lowry.
always come alive.
He's
And I mean,
always there, man.
I mean, I don't know how political it is, but it seems like these Ulster guys keep on missing out on island selection, and some of them, the boys can play. The boys can
They can
play.
play. They can play. Ulster play a good brand of rugby. I mean, you saw how they're even moving the ball, and again, being at home, it's the same for them when they come here. But yeah, look, Ulster were good. They were good. Let's be honest.
Yeah, something that wasn't good. Bulls losing to Welsh opposition.
Yeah.
You know what? I'll even
Jeez.
go on record. I'll go on record and say this. This is a free podcast. You have to pay me to watch that game. I only
Yeah.
watched some highlights, but you're not going to
Look.
catch me watching that. The only thing I will say is Matanzima, happy for him. I think it was his 50th appearance.
Yeah.
He got a try. Happy
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. Look. Yes, happy for Matanzima, but very disappointed with the Bulls, because they just allowed Scarlets to come at them. The whole game, they were being outbulled. Up until second half, where now it was too late. Yes,
Yeah.
fine, they brought it back, to 30-28. But when you look at that overall, especially how they played back in the second half, they shouldn't have found themselves in that position. And then also just, defensive setup. Like we're getting caught out wide, and yes, you quite rightly pointed out. Is it a trend? Is it the coaching structures? I've been saying that questioning sometimes that defense where we're not really covering all the space and we're leaving guys out wide, and
it's because we play high school rugby where guys hit it narrow. I think it's a knock-on effect from that, where you'll go to grassroots games, you won't see the ball get that air that maybe you'll see the ball get in Ireland. And it's a situation where we're used to that copper stump type rugby, and that's maybe why we're getting caught out so narrow.
Yeah, and also just that flatness again, like I said with the Stormers, that the peaks and the troughs of the curve, So yeah, look, better second half. They got the bonus point, which is good in the sense that, but it's still Scarlets, and like really, man, like really, again, I'm gonna go back and say the soft underbelly, because I really believe that the Bulls, as much as they are good and as much as they can really bring it physically and take a game away from a team, they don't have a solid base or core where, regardless, even if they're off just 2%, 5%, they're still monsters. They can't reach that consistency. And I think that's a big problem for them, because fine, granted away from home, but they just can't get to firing from the get-go, and that's what hurt them this game against the Scarlets. But they'll be better. They should be better.
We'll see. Sharks versus Edinburgh. Edinburgh tend to be tricky for the South African sides.
Yeah, I think a big one. I think just we've even said Edinburgh can play. We know that they can play, and they like to do.
And the thing is, they play how we don't want them to play.
Yeah, and you saw that, fine, yes, opportunist intercept. Oh, really opportunist, because you read it well, Grant Williams, but
Grant Williams was the only guy playing in that first half.
And then you got the Ox, that outside break and handoff on the 9.
Okay. I suppose.
Do not. I don't even think JK can do that. I've never seen JK do that. Let me just say, I never see JK do that. But anyway, it's not about him. I think the Sharks, you can see that attitude, that Neil Powell attitude of just grinding it out, toughing it out, because it was a difficult one in Edinburgh, to come away with that result, especially at the end when they were under pressure.
And Edinburgh, they came back into it and they started to get more physical and they started to match the Sharks physically, especially in the first half. And then they started to get that transition going, that passing style, the offloads. All of a sudden, there's no rucks. They're spreading the ball out wide.
Yeah.
They kept on building with that. Some missed tackles by our guy Pepsi Buthelezi. But good thing was, in the second half, that's when I felt that he kicked in. And I felt that Fassi also kicked in the second half. Yeah,
it's just the start, and I think you can say the same with them and the Bulls. It's just they don't get firing, they don't start off the game well. And yes, being away from home, but then they just allowed Edinburgh. It's so hard to stop that momentum once they get in behind them. And again, it's just the setup on defense, the pillar defense. I think we saw that, if not all our teams actually this past weekend, where they got caught out pillar defense at the break. The speed of the breakdown was just too good, and that means that the momentum that they generated of that carry, they got way beyond the advantage line, and they easily getting punished, But credit to the Sharks for fighting, coming back.
Big credit. They showed character in this game. My biggest takeaway from this is that they showed character. There's moments where if this team was under the previous coach, they would have crumbled. And I felt like they kept it. They did the thing that the Stormers do well when they kept in range. They kept in one score. They hung around. They wouldn't be put down. Credit to guys like Fenta who really fought to keep them in the game. Big moments from Fenta. Even Fassi defensively, big moments. Cameron Wright came on. He also played well. My thing is just the character, and that's
Yeah,
the biggest takeaway from me is that they showed that in this game where previously they would have just rolled over and called it a day.
yeah. And I mean, like in terms of the character, I think we saw it even in the past few games. You know, you can start seeing that. You know, they're looking more of a tighter unit. You know, more
Yeah.
focused. And look, credit to Neil Powell, because I mean his experience. You know, let's not discount his experience or Seven's experience of going to different places and winning. You know,
Mm.
and not being phased by being in a different environment. You know, obviously that also rubs off. You know, I mean, how many tournaments has he been to everywhere around the world? So it's bound to, you know, ease that sort of away game thing, feeling of the players. But again, it's the players themselves that you know, pick themselves up and actually do get the job done and hang in there, which I think they did right through that game. And like you said, they didn't allow themselves to be put down. You know, so it's a big credit. I mean, Edinburgh is not easy. You know, especially
Yeah.
there, it's not easy.
Yeah, moving on to my boys. You know, tough one. But Hendrickse, a shocker, absolute shocker from Hendrickse. He was
Yeah.
also caught narrow on defense, and he kept.
Mm,
I don't even know. Every time you think he's gonna have that development in his game, he takes a step back.
mm,
But I suppose it is what it is. Other things, that same structure and passing of the Irish teams, the Lions just couldn't deal with it.
mm, mm. They couldn't, and you know, and especially those what you call it, those behind around the corner, behind the back
Yeah.
walls. You know, we get caught out a lot. Most of our teams get caught out a lot with that.
And you know what they were
Those sort
doing
of running
here?
lines.
You know what they were also doing here is they kept on giving the inside pass. So they
Yeah.
were, when they kept on doing that, they were keeping the Lions defense honest to say like
Mm.
no one must overtrack
Don't
and
overtrack and don't shift out too far. You
yes,
know.
and even making sure that that pillar defense is there.
Mm.
So I think we
And
saw
even
we
at
saw
times
that as
they
well.
still got caught out on the pillar though, badly, even, you know, at
Mm.
different times.
Yeah, for the one
Because that's what
try.
it was. If you look at the Lions really that game, it's defensively, especially defensively. I think out of all the South African teams, okay, even the Stormers, but Ulster is a different kettle of fish. But Connacht and Lions were almost like on equal footing. You know,
The Lions were even ahead at one point. You know what the problem
yeah,
was here? The problem was you can only defend for so long. You're playing against this passing structure where they're stretching you wide.
mm,
You get the turnover. From the turnover, you get the line out. Then PJ Porter is rattled. He messes up the line out. They score a try. The
yeah,
relief that you get from that line out to get out of your territory and start playing in their territory, that's what they lacked in this game. And there was a number of times where they'd get the turnover, but they wouldn't get the relief. You
mm,
need that relief. You can't just be defending the whole game. You need to get out of your
yeah,
22. And that's like I said, Lions were even ahead after Ntlabakanya scored. But it's that same thing of turnover and then we can't get out. And
yeah,
it's I don't know what it is. I mean, the forwards, they did play well. There's guys that did step up. I feel like Darian Landsberg, he's really playing well. He's a better version of Hiron Andrews. Um,
yeah,
there's guys that are coming along, but the problem is that they're not getting that relief at vital points in the game, and then it's it's
yeah.
it's it's it's, it's an easy score against them.
And transferring pressure back. They're
Yeah.
not doing that. But I think just overall, it goes back to that, you know, not having, especially in the back line, you know, not having those really experienced guys, you know, test level players. Because right now in their back line, I mean, you know, there's nobody really that you can say is a test level player, especially, I mean, if you look at the decision making positions, nine,
Like I said,
not two,
Hendricks had a shocker. He was throwing forward
nine,
passes. He got
10.
charged down. He was
Yeah,
just all over the place. Van Veek did play better though.
yeah, he did. He did. Uh, yeah, okay. I'll give him that. I'll excuse him for that, because that one try when I just, you know, he was just he was coming tracking from the other side, you know.
Mm.
So it's just, I wouldn't put that on him, you know. It's just general positioning, you know, from the team, and I think also communication, you know, because I think the majority of the weekend there's a lot of lethargy from the South African players, you know, the South African
Mm.
teams, for most part of the weekend, and that's why I say it's almost like, there was that high, and then now that curve is sort of balancing out, and it's surprising because Six Nations is here, and we've got all our big hitters. It's a bit strange, in that respect, but I'm hoping to see as it progresses, that they start hitting their straps. But at the same time, I think there's also that bigger picture, especially with our big players, So it's going to be an interesting end of sort of run to the tournament, particularly because it's a World Cup year. I think that's going to make it even more interesting to see how that goes. But definitely our teams need to sort of pick up again. The downward curve is expected, but they can't let it slip, or let it get too far away from them. That's just from my side,
Yeah, just a few closing comments here. I don't want to hear anything about Mani Lebok because we saw Ngomezulu, we saw Volitzer, we saw them struggle, we saw Hendrickson struggle, we saw the Bulls lose. I don't know how Christmas played, but it doesn't even matter because he's not even on the radar really. So I don't want to hear anything about Mani Lebok going forward. And Shark Stormers, that's the only one we have to look forward to this weekend.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a very, very big one. I think psychologically for the Sharks, they need to get this one, And again, it's the reason it's big is because the Stormers as well, they they're defending champs, right? So they want to also make a statement and bounce back. And I think it's going to be a crucial game to define both teams this season. I think in terms of, where it's going to put them mentally, going into the back end of the tournament. So a lot of pressure, but I think it's going to be a very, very, very interesting game. Should be exciting. I think we should expect some score. Should expect some score.
Sharks, you'll see if they can keep on that momentum, and Stormers, you'll see if they can bounce back. So it's just it should be a good one. Any closing remarks on your side?
No. All I want to see from the Sharks, definitely better execution. When you got teams under pressure, and really, the same grit, because the Stormers is not going to be easy, and they're not going to just let you take it. So yeah, I believe we've got this one. And we need it.